God bless America. Hello, everybody. I am the Talk Radio Protege. This is the Protege program. Thank you so much for joining me. Welcome back from your weekend. I hope that you had a fantastic one and got to relax a little bit. Looking forward to another fantastic week of discussing the news and politics with you. So the president had a couple of meetings over the past couple of days, and we're going to spend a little bit more time on one than we are on the other. So I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version of Trump's meeting and press conference with Theresa May that happened on Sunday. I want to say it was on Sunday. Maybe it was Saturday. I think it was Sunday. So the president sat down, apparently, or had an interview with The Sun, a UK-based, I think they're a magazine. They're on the web, I know that, and said some things that were very critical of Theresa May and the way that she's been handling Brexit and her government. Now, there was a lot of truth, in my opinion, to what was said, and they were things that needed to be said. It was kind of it was friendly criticism. I think it could be couched as constructive criticism. It's hard to take criticism as constructive when you're on the receiving end of the criticism. But I think that Trump's statements to The Sun could have been couched as constructive criticism, but instead of doing that in the press conference that Trump had with Theresa May later that day, I think it was the same day, he kind of backpedaled on what he said. He denied having criticized Theresa May. I think that what Trump was doing in that moment was taking a definition of criticism that nobody else has of criticism. And I've criticized Peter Strzok when he did the same thing concerning bias. I criticized James Comey when he took the same approach to classified material. So I'm going to say that President Trump was wrong for taking a definition of criticism that nobody else in the world uses for criticism. I think that when Trump said, I was not criticizing Theresa May, he was saying that he was not attacking or trying to denigrate or insult Theresa May. Now, when people say that they were criticizing someone, they're not saying that they're insulting that person. So I think that Trump was playing a little bit into the hands of the left and the left-wing media when he said that he wasn't criticizing Theresa May. Because you can very easily say, well, yes, this was an interview that you did, and you did criticize Theresa May, therefore you lied. So taking a definition of a word and trying to spin what you did in terms of that word using your definition that nobody else uses is not good for you. It makes you look like a liar and a dishonest person. So I think it's an unforced error by Trump to do this as far as backpedaling from his statements. I think it would have been much more productive to couch his criticism as constructive rather than insulting, which you know, no matter what he said, he was going to get attacked by the left-wing media. Let's not pretend that that was a loaded question, that Trump made an unforced error by talking to The Sun before this press conference and saying the things that he did, and then coming out and saying, trying to backpedal from it. Now, the worst thing that you can do when you're facing the left-wing media is backpedal from anything that you're doing. So I think it would have, like I said, it would have been much better for Trump to just say, yes, I did say these things about Theresa May, and I meant them as constructive criticism coming from a friendly world leader. I think that would have been that would have been much more easily defensible than to say, no, I didn't criticize Theresa May. But I don't want to spend the most of our time talking about that meeting. I want to spend the majority of our time talking about the Russia meeting. You might remember that in the days leading up to the Russia meeting, Rosenstein came out and indicted a number of Russian agents in attempting to disrupt the 2016 election. I said that at the time that it was a PR move, that probably not very much is going to come about. There are opinions that Rosenstein indicting these Russians is evidence that Russia and Trump colluded together to disrupt the election. There are opinions that these indictments are evidence that simply Russia was trying to destabilize the country via disrupting the election. And I tend to agree with the latter, that really the only evidence that these indictments are is evidence that Russia tries to mess with us by messing with our elections. And we shouldn't be looking at this through a partisan lens. We shouldn't be looking at this and saying, this proves that Trump needs to be impeached, which it certainly doesn't. But we also don't need to look at this and say, well, this is proof that nothing untoward happened in the election whatsoever. Now, there's no evidence that the Russian activity did substantially impact the election, but these indictments are not evidence that nothing untoward happened in the election. But Russians were indicted, therefore Trump needed to cancel his meeting with Putin. Now, he didn't cancel his meeting with Putin. He's going to get attacked whether he cancels the meeting with Putin or not. If he had not canceled the meeting with Putin, then the left is going to say that he's a puppet, that he's meeting with his puppet master, and yada, yada, yada. If he did cancel the meeting with Putin, then the left is going to call Trump a scaredy cat for not going and talking to Putin. They were going to attack Trump as being scared that the truth was going to be revealed, that not meeting with Putin is evidence that Trump is a puppet, and he's trying to just divert attention away from the fact that he's not meeting with his puppet master. So he had the meeting. There was a private meeting. Then there was a semi-private meeting where the private meeting, I'm assuming, was between Trump, Putin, and their interpreters. And then the semi-private meeting involved advisors of both of these presidents. And then there was a press conference. And the press conference, what I'm taking away from the press conference is that both presidents set a low-tension, friendly tone. And the analysis coming out of the mainstream media goes like this. Putin was dominant. He dominated the press conference. Trump was weak and feckless, much like a puppet should be in the shadow of his puppet master. And the other piece of analysis is that Trump did not stand up to Putin according to conventional wisdom. Now, the conventional wisdom of diplomacy is that any chance you get to call out somebody, another world leader, another world power, for doing things that are disruptive to the balance of power, that are denying human rights to their constituencies, that you do it. And if you don't do it, that means you're being soft. And of course, President Obama, throughout his presidency, would say plenty of things to call out Russia for doing things that it was doing. But he wouldn't actually do anything as far as standing up to Russia. All of Obama's standing up to Russia was words. Trump, so far, has kind of taken the opposite approach. When it comes to his rhetoric, Trump is soft on Russia in terms of rhetoric. But when it comes to action, Trump has bombed Russian-occupied Air Force bases in Syria. The Trump-led military has killed Russian mercenaries in Syria, and Trump has armed the people of Crimea. These are 3 points that Ben Shapiro made in his show today, and I think that it's worth repeating. That President Trump is taking a different approach from previous presidents, but it's not the approach that the left-wing media is telling you that it is. The left-wing media is also telling you that Trump is taking an approach to the U.S.-Russia relationship that no other president has taken, but they're telling you that it's bad. They're telling you that Trump is being totally soft on Russia, and that nothing that Trump is doing is inhibiting Russia's spread of their influence across the world. But that's not the truth. So Trump is rhetorically being soft on Russia, but his actions are not doing that in the slightest. He's doing a lot of things that are actions that are inhibiting Russian power. Now, the last thing that I want to do before we finally get into the columns that we're going to look at today is I want to tell you what my instincts are as far as our relationship with Russia should go. First of all, I think that we should be skeptical of the vast majority of actions that Russia takes. They are our rivals. They want to be a world superpower again. Putin is taking actions that points to this mindset. He's being imperialistic. He's trying to spread his Russia influence across the world. He is doing things that are in contradiction to American interests. So we should be skeptical of Russia when they want to be our friends. We have a bad history with Russia. I don't think that should automatically disqualify Russia from being friendly with us, but we do have a bad history with Russia, and it affects the way that we think about them as far as our foreign policy goes. Now, those things being said, let's look at this story from Fox News. This is going to have more facts than opinion, I think, as far as the story goes. So, Trump and Putin tackled allegations of election meddling in unprecedented terms following their one-on-one summit Monday, with Trump opening the door to an unusual offer of cooperation in the special counsel probe, and the Russian president suggested he indeed favored the billionaire businessman in 2016. So, let us take a look. Putin emphatically and repeatedly denied meddling in the U.S. election, saying there's no evidence. Now, this is kind of typical rhetoric, I think. You know, just the way that presidents are portrayed in the media, in entertainment media, not in the mainstream media, and you know, just thinking about it, it makes sense that Putin would be able to say and believe that Russia did not meddle in the U.S. elections, because Putin doesn't have to tell his intelligence people to go meddle in U.S. elections. They're going to do it because it's the mission statement of Russia to try and weaken the United States of America. They're our rivals. They want us to be a little bit weaker. I would not be surprised at all if China had meddled in U.S. elections in 2016, but nobody's talking about that. We're just talking about Russia. Trump's saying they spent a great deal of time discussing the allegations, blasted the ongoing probe as a disaster for our country. Now, one thing that Trump said here that I thought was interesting, he said, "I would rather take a political risk in pursuit of peace than to risk peace in pursuit of politics." Now, I think what Trump is talking about here is the politics between Democrats and Republicans. I don't think he's necessarily talking about the politics between the United States and Russia. He could be. He could be talking about that difference, but I think he's talking about Democrats and Republicans when it comes to politics. And I think he sees conflict between the United States and Russia, arguably two of the strongest countries in the world right now, as being dangerous for the entire world. That when U.S. and Russian interests clash in the world, that it's just bad for whoever they're clashing over. Let us look at some of the quotes farther on down here. Let us see if we can draw any insight from some of this. This one is interesting. When asked which side is responsible for damaged relations, Trump said, "I hold both countries responsible." Now, this has been a comment that has drawn a lot of ire from both sides of the political part of the political discussion in the United States, which is interesting because 2 years ago, the Democrats were saying that the United States was what was wrong with the world. The United States was the problem. That was the premise of the Obama apology tour in 2008, was that the U.S. was wrong on all accounts and that we needed to apologize and we needed to pull back. So I don't see why the Democrats are upset that Trump is at least partially embracing their rhetoric from the Obama presidency. Now, I understand why Republicans are upset about this, and I myself don't agree with the premise that the United States is the reason that the United States and Russia have bad relations. Now, but think about it this way. Look at it from the perspective of a third-party country who has no interest in the conflict between the U.S. and Russia whatsoever. Let's say that this country doesn't share an economic system with either the U.S. or Russia. Now, you're looking at one country that believes one thing and they want to exercise their will upon the world, and the other country has their way of looking at things, their economic system, and they want to exercise their will upon the world. naturally these two countries are going to clash, and that kind of observer would think that since these two parties are clashing, that one of them could stop clashing and it would stop some of the conflict. So from that perspective, both countries are at fault for causing bad relations between the two. Now, if you are to examine the two countries closer and you are to determine that one country is in the right morally and the other country is in the wrong morally, then the country that's morally in the wrong would be the country that's at fault for bad relations between the two countries. And, you know, we live in a world of that has embraced moral relativism. So both countries, in this case Russia and the United States, think of themselves as being morally right. Now, I don't believe that Russia is morally right. I believe in an objective system of morality for the world. But we look at Russia and think, if only they would be led by better people, if only they would act in a way that was better for the world, we could be friends. And Russia looks at us and thinks, if only they would do and say and act in a way that is better for Russia, then we could be friends and things would be better for the world. So it's a clashing mindset, no matter what way you look at it. So you can parse this statement that I hold both countries responsible and say that there's a kernel of truth to that. Now, anybody that strives for objective truth and objective morality is going to look at that and say, well, the president is clearly wrong in saying that the United States is partially to blame for bad relations between the U.S. and Russia, because the U.S. is in the right and Russia is in the wrong. And I myself think that that is true. But for anybody that is getting up in arms about the president saying this, I'm trying to communicate to you the mindset that he might be thinking through when he makes this statement. He might be looking at Russia and saying, well, they think that they are in the right, and therefore they think, and he's trying to build some bridges here. You know, I look at this press conference and I see President Trump as being willing to forgive Russia for some of the things that they've done. I see him as willing to make a concession here or there where it's debatable who is right and who is wrong, at least in terms of our moral relativistic society. And he's willing to make a small concession for the sake of building a bridge with Russia. Now, I think that it is hysterical, some of the statements that followed Trump's statement that he holds both countries responsible for bad relations. Senator Ben Sasse of Nebraska said, "This is bizarre and flat out wrong. The United States is not to blame." And Sasse is being consistent. Ben Sasse is a Republican, and generally speaking, Republicans believe that the United States is not the problem in the world, but the solution. So Ben Sasse is being consistent. Somebody that's not being consistent is John Brennan, the former CIA director of the Obama administration, when he says Donald Trump's press conference performance in Helsinki raises to and exceeds the threshold of quote-unquote high crimes and misdemeanors. It was nothing short of treasonous. Not only were Trump's comments imbecilic, he is wholly in the pocket of Putin. Republican patriots, where are you? Now, I will cite for John Brennan the statement made by Ben Sasse. Republicans are not happy that Trump said that the United States is partially to blame for bad relations between the U.S. and Russia. But John Brennan is being hypocritical in saying that it's wrong for Trump to blame Russia, to blame the United States for the problems that we're having with Russia, but it's not wrong for Obama to blame the U.S. for the problems the U.S. is having with literally everybody else. John Brennan is being the hypocrite because he is saying that it's wrong for Trump to say that the U.S. is partially the problem when it comes to our relationship with Russia, but Obama was not wrong in saying that the U.S. is the problem, not partially the problem, is the problem when it comes to all other countries and their relationship with us. Now, I've spent way too much time getting off in the weeds in a whole lot of things that we're talking about today, so I want to go ahead and move on. I want to look at two opinion pieces concerning the Trump-Putin meetings that happened yesterday, or this morning, whenever. One of them is cynical and one of them is optimistic as far as the direction that Trump is going with these meetings. We'll look at the cynical one first. This is from Doug Schoen, a Democrat contributor over at Fox News. And I will say, as a disclaimer, that Doug Schoen is my favorite Democrat. I think he's one of the very old guard Democrats. He comes from back when Bill Clinton was the president. He's a fan of Bill Clinton when he was considered to be a moderate Democrat. I think that Doug Schoen is the most honest Democrat, the only honest Democrat, in my personal opinion. Doug Schoen was one of the only Democrats that criticized Hillary Clinton in 2016. If you don't know who Doug Schoen is, that's who Doug Schoen is. Now let's read, let's try to get through this pretty quickly. Monday in Helsinki, President Trump left many deeply disappointed in his approach to his summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin. That's probably just a factual observation. There was nothing inherently wrong with Trump's summit with Putin. See, this is why I love Doug Schoen, and he can be honest. He can honestly say that Trump's approach, that there was merit to Trump's approach. In fact, I would argue that in many cases, some of the best diplomacy comes through face-to-face meetings with adversaries. Still, the meeting was highly problematic in how little Trump delivered on the serious issues surrounding Vladimir Putin and Russia's place in the modern world. See, Doug Schoen is very conventional wisdom oriented when it comes to his opinions on politics. Doug Schoen, let's put it this way. My analysis of Doug Schoen's opinion is that Doug Schoen believes that conventional wisdom is the gospel truth. So, Doug Schoen thinks that when a president of the United States meets with or has an encounter with foreign dignitaries of states that do things that are against the interests of the United States or are against basic human rights, that the president should criticize that country, no matter the consequences, no matter the goal of the meeting. If President Trump was going to talk to North Korea, and North Korea was 95% denuclearized, but they were still committing some acts, some violations of human rights, Doug Schoen would say, in the interests of, Doug Schoen would say that the president needs to criticize North Korea, even if that criticism would cause them to totally reverse their approach to denuclearization. That's just conventional wisdom when it comes to criticizing states that have records of abusing human rights. At their joint press conference, President Putin was calculated and in control. Conversely, President Trump seemed to lack authority, praising Putin when he should have been condemning him, and ceding opportunities to confront Putin on his most egregious actions of the past decade. See, just more conventional wisdom. President Trump should have criticized Putin because Putin is the bad guy. And conventional wisdom says you criticize the bad guy every single chance you get. Every single meeting that you have, every single encounter that there is, you criticize the bad guy. I'm not saying that it's wrong to criticize the bad guy. I'm just saying that it might be a tactical decision to not criticize the bad guy this time. Not saying that Trump will never criticize Russia or that he shouldn't criticize Russia. Just saying, maybe it was a tactical decision that Doug Schoen is disagreeing with here. During Putin and Trump's prepared remarks, it was rather obvious who had led the discussion. While President Putin laid out a clear framework for advancing Russian interests within the context of U.S.-Russia relations, Trump appeared to have had little plan. Alternating between vague promises of improving our relationship with Russia and spending too much time on U.S. domestic affairs, notably the 2016 presidential election, instead of holding Putin accountable for his election interference. He referenced his defeat of Hillary Clinton. Now, I've talked about earlier, it's called plausible deniability. Putin isn't told when Russia is going to interfere with U.S. elections. That way he can go out and say what he believes is the truth when he says that Russia didn't interfere with the U.S. elections. Now, again, I'm going a lot longer than I originally wanted to, so I'm just going to go ahead and go on to the next story. You can feel free to go and look up these stories and find if they and read them in full and see what your opinions are on these things. The optimistic, or what I read as the optimistic opinion on the Trump and Putin summit, comes from the Patriot Post. And the article is titled, "A New Reset with Russia." Trump's hyperbolic flattery aside, his primary task is to clean up after his predecessor. Now, this one is much shorter than Doug Schoen's piece, so we might read the whole thing. But anyway, you can go and find it if we don't get to it. The left is all aflutter as President Donald Trump meets with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, today. There are endless stories worrying that Trump will either be duped by a superior statesman or continue colluding with our sworn enemy. Hillary Clinton is running around telling stiff post-World Cup jokes, blah, blah, blah. Trump said before the summit, "Our relationship with Russia has never been worse thanks to the many years of U.S. foolishness and stupidity, and now the rigged witch hunt." The later was a reference to Mueller's investigation. So this tweet is a continuance of what is, in my opinion, the tactical decision to not criticize the bad guy this time. Let's go ahead and skip on ahead a little bit. Clinton was Obama's Secretary of State, famous for the debacle in Benghazi and the failed reset button, signifying a different stance towards Russia. She cashed in with the uranium deal, old news. It was Obama who told Putin's stooge Dmitry Medvedev in 2012 that he'd have more flexibility to offer favors to Moscow after winning re-election. So this paragraph highlights the hypocrisy of the Democrats as they say that Trump is being soft on Russia because, like I said, the Obama administration was very rhetorically harsh towards Russia, but as far as their actions went, they were perhaps the softest administration ever towards Russia. They made all kinds of concessions towards Russia in terms of real hard action. It was only their rhetoric that was harsh. Trump's task is to clean up after his predecessor. Last year, Mark Alexander noted two key elements in Trump's strategy. First, Russia's anemic economy is totally dependent on oil and gas prices, so Trump has opened the gate on oil exploration to keep the price down. In general, to ensure dominance over totalitarian and dictator states, Trump is taking action to rekindle America's economic might. Second, Trump is following Ronald Reagan's playbook to rebuild our military to contain threats like Russian expansion into Ukraine, which got a yawn from Obama. That was something that I told you that Ben Shapiro had talked about, that Trump has armed the Crimeans, that he has bombed Russian air bases in Syria, that he has that the military under his leadership has killed Russian mercenaries, Russian nationals in Syria. The U.S. military has been responsible for killing. Last paragraph, Trump now hopes for an extraordinary relationship with Putin, who is far from innocent. Similar to Trump's hyperbole about North Korea's Kim Jong-un, he's playing a bit of flattery for strategic gain. But that does not mean he's going to sell out America the way Obama did for 8 years. Nothing bad is going to come out of meeting with Putin, Trump said, and maybe some good will come out. After the president's shakeup of NATO last week, it's certainly clear he aims to mop up Obama's messes. So this guy seems to agree with me. Or maybe I agree with him. I did read this column before I started recording this video. That it's a tactical decision to simply not criticize the bad guy just this time. Trump has not said that he's never going to criticize Putin. Trump has certainly not been as harsh when speaking towards Russia as he could have been. It would have thrown a really big wrench into the allegations of Russian collusion if Trump had come out from day one and just hammered and hammered and hammered and hammered Putin and the Russian actions. Or maybe Trump would have hammered the snot out of Russia, and the media would have said, "Oh, he's just trying to cover up his He's just trying to cover up his involvement, his collusion." Trump is going to get criticized no matter what he does with Russia. He's either not going to be harsh enough, or he's going to be, he's going to be too harsh, or he's going to be so harsh that he must be trying to cover up for his crimes against the country. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, hit subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications so that you don't miss videos coming up in the future. In 2 weeks, I'm going to be going on vacation, and I've got 2 of the 5 videos that I want to have done recorded already. I am in the planning stages on number 3. I'm in the recording stages on number 4, and I'm also in the planning stages on number 5. I think I've got all of the topics decided that I want to talk about. And it's just now I've got to make the time to record the videos and edit them and get them scheduled. So I hope that you guys will be around for those videos. I think it's going to be some of my better work because I'm putting a lot more thought into these videos, trying to produce content that's going to be more or less timeless. Thank you guys again so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you'll come back next time. Until then, good night and God bless.